Welcome to Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican about the interesting people, places, and issues of northern New Mexico. I am Inez Russell Gomez, your host, and this week I am talking to Justice Briana Zamora about the new competency diversion pilot program designed to improve how the criminal justice system intersects with offenders who are mentally ill. Thank you, Justice Zamora, for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
First of all, why don't we talk about how the courts and why the courts developed this program? It's been some time in the making. How did it come about?
So, prior to being on the Supreme Court, I was a trial court judge in Albuquerque. I presided over all adult criminal cases. And the one type of case where there was absolutely no options available were the individuals who were deemed incompetent. You'd have families in your courtroom begging for help, parents who wanted their children to get help. And really, in the end, all we did was dismiss the vast majority of the cases. They'd come back a few weeks later with a new charge, and it would just be an revolving door of dismissals and never a connection to treatment. I left there feeling more frustrated about that than anything else. So when I got to the Supreme Court, I learned that there are people in all professions with a similar frustration. So we came together. We went to a competency policy academy in DC, and one of the proposals that came out of that academy was to start a diversion program. And it took a while because there's a lot of legal issues that come up with it, but that is how it originally started. And it was this shared concern over the fact that there's just simply nothing we've done with these individuals who are just in and out of our courthouses.
And that's one of the issues that's leading to frustration among citizens, that they feel like there's a revolving door and people aren't held accountable. But at the same time, if you're a mentally ill shoplifter, getting 6 months in the county jail or even going to prison, let's say if your crime is more severe, doesn't really get at the root of the problem, which is the fact that you're mentally ill.
Exactly. And so this isn't even a New Mexico issue. The United States Constitution requires that individuals understand the nature of the charges against them, and in essence, the proceedings. That's your constitutional right, and it makes perfect sense. And that's different than whether you understand that you committed the crime. But we got to make sure that when individuals go through the court process, they understand it. And that's why if there's no, they're deemed incompetent, the vast majority of cases get dismissed under New Mexico law. But even then, they're not getting, even if you restore them, restoration is not treatment. So really what we want to find out is what happens if you treat these individuals with the dignity they deserve. You get them treatment, you get them services, you help them find housing, you help them find food. We want to see what happens because we were doing nothing before with this population.
So basically, you'd come to court, let's say I'm a mentally ill person. I have done something that, involves the justice system, and I'm held to be incompetent. So I really can't understand what's going on. So they dismiss the charges. But at the same time, the court at that point can't say, but you're so incompetent, you should have to go to treatment somewhere. And that's where the civil competency problem or issue is coming kind of side by side. Is that related in any way?
It is. So on the criminal side, I want to be clear. So if someone commits a serious crime like murder or rape or anything that's dangerous, they go to the New Mexico Behavioral Health Institute and they try to treat them to competency. I don't mean treatment in the normal sense. That's educating them about the process. But the vast majority are correct. If we dismiss the case, we cannot refer them to treatment. We don't even have jurisdiction in the criminal case. Now, can a different party file separately entirely to get them civilly committed? They can. And now in some jurisdictions, including Santa Fe, we have another civil process, which is assisted outpatient treatment. And again, that's separate from the criminal case. And those are some options that the court can consider if someone files. It has to be an entirely separate proceeding. It's not associated with a criminal charge.
Okay. So there's a lot going on in this in this area of law and this area of not crime, but of kind of public disturbances and issues that are making the communities feel less safe.
Exactly. Yes. And I understand that. I mean, just living in New Mexico, and I understand. But I feel like giving this a try instead of doing nothing will in the long run be better for public safety.
Okay, so let's go back to the competency diversion pilot project. So what is the pilot project and where is it working in New Mexico right now?
So we're piloting it in San Miguel County in Las Vegas, um, both Lincoln County and Otero County. That's the 12th Judicial District. We started it in Las Cruces. They've been going for over a year, and our last site is going to be Albuquerque. And then, of course, we have it here in Santa Fe, but it just started. So what's our idea? We are going to pilot it because we've not done this, and we are picking a population with high need. So we know this is going to be a challenge. But the idea is, as soon as they get arrested or charged, that very first contact with them, we have them screened for the program. If they have a history of incompetency, a history of civil commitment, history of participating in AOT, they would be eligible for the program, provided they're not charged with a DWI or a violent felony. Once they're screened, their lawyer will talk to them hopefully right away before that initial hearing, or at least at the initial hearing, because we want this done quickly. They can talk to them and see if they want to go to treatment, and it's voluntary. And they want services, or they can go through the regular process, get an evaluation, set conditions of release, and do all of that. If they go through the competency program, they should have a clinical assessment by a licensed professional that not only addresses their psychological needs, but do they need housing? Who is this person? What are their individualized needs? They get that assessment within 7 days. Then they get, based on that assessment, they work with, we call it a navigator, but those people, the navigators, are basically peer support workers. They're individuals with lived experience. And this was very purposeful because we think maybe they'll have a greater impact on them. And they start referring them to the treatment that's recommended by the assessment, or finding them the services that they need. It's not a huge amount of involvement on the participants' part. I want to be very clear on that. It's voluntary. And the reason for that is because we want to make sure it's not like a treatment court. They don't have that same depth of understanding that is needed. Mm-hmm. But it is a connection to services. For misdemeanors, it's anywhere between 90 days and 6 months. For nonviolent felonies, it's anywhere from 6 months to a year. And it's really to keep them out of the court and in contact with that peer support worker. We want to have them out in the community getting as much treatment as possible.
So what is hoped is that if the person is diverted and caught, they will get the services they need and perhaps won't be back reoffending, because the reoffense is part of their mental illness as much as it is a desire to be a criminal, perhaps.
You said it beautifully.
Or even, yeah. And it might just because they're hungry. I mean, sometimes people steal to sell things because they got to get food.
That's true.
But
we feel like if they're on medication and treatment, and like you said, they have food security, they have a roof over their head, they're not walking without shoes in our community. If they have those basic needs met, we want to see if it decreases the amount of cases, because some of these individuals are coming in every other week, some once a month, some a few times a year. There's an individual in Albuquerque who has 159 misdemeanors, and that's 159 times that we did not use that opportunity to connect him to services.
And that's actually one of the points that I think people have talked about in dealing with whatever, perceptions are wrong in the criminal justice system right now, is that if you could get the high offenders and take them out of the system, all of a sudden what you think is this huge crisis in crime or, disorderliness might go away.
Yes. And so these individuals have a lot of cases. It's a small group. We've only had 26 graduates, and probably half will disappear. They won't graduate because they're just abscond and we can't find them, right? They don't have, that's this population.
Right.
But I think you're right. Generally, the ones that are even the most dangerous criminals, it's not the vast majority of cases in front of us. It's a small group, and you're right. Those are the ones we need to target.
Right. And with the really dangerous ones, that might be that they have to go to prison for a very long time or be held pre-trial in a way that we're not doing right now for different reasons. But that's a different discussion. But for these, let's say if you're a small business and you got the same guy breaking in, or breaking your windows every, twice a month or three times a month, if that person goes away, you're going to feel a lot safer.
Absolutely. I mean, even if something's not violent, or even if they're just a nuisance constantly in your life,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I want to be clear, the families I talk about in my courtroom as a trial court judge are not just defendants' families; they're victims and victims' families.
Right.
So you hear it from all sides, and you want to figure out a way so that these exactly the defendant A stops going to the same store over and over and over, and it could be caused by some delusion or hallucination, we don't know, with these particular individuals.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, let's take a quick break and then we'll be back on the other side to talk about what you're finding in your pilot. We'll be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
We make renewable doable. We're positive energy solar for a cleaner, brighter future for all. Positive energy's the right call. Feel good about your energy bill. Help save the planet too. Your trusted solar company, working hard for you. Generate positive energy. Positive energy solar.
We're back with Conversations Different, talking about the competency diversion pilot project with Justice Zamora of the Supreme Court. You had said that in Las Cruces, they've been doing this now for about a year. What has that experience taught us about how this is going to work?
So we've had 26 graduates statewide as of July. Seems like a
Okay.
small number, but they have a large number of cases. And none of them had to go through the competency evaluation process. There was no cost, no court hearings for that. During their time in the program in Las Cruces, I'm going to pick that particular judicial district, they each did 6 months instead of the 90 days. They were all misdemeanors. The ones who did the 6 months and graduated did not pick up any new charges in those 6 months, which for this population is significant. And last I heard, they hadn't picked up any new charges, but that was a few months ago. So I don't know what's happened since then. But even if we went a year, I assure you that's a long time. They were all connected to services. They all completed and graduated. But what I want to highlight for Las Cruces that is a little different from some of the smaller towns, and I think it might be true for Santa Fe, but we'll see, is a lot of the individuals, about half the people who originally signed up did not go through the program and complete it because they couldn't find them. They just never showed up to anything after. And I think in large part, these individuals are the ones that are unhoused. So
Okay.
we now know, and that's makes my head hurt trying to figure out a way to get this population in particular, if not all of justice involved individuals, it's really hard to find them housing, and housing that's suitable for whatever their needs might be. If they have certain types of trauma, congregate housing might not be suitable. If they are having different types of hallucinations or delusions, that there might be certain areas that wouldn't work. So that has been something we'd like to look at and improve. Interestingly, in Alamogordo and Ruidoso, they have not, somehow they find them, and I think it's because it's smaller, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So they haven't kicked anyone out. Not kicked anyone out, I shouldn't say. They haven't had individuals who have absconded or left the program or just lose contact with the court. They've been able to somehow find them and get them back in. And
Okay.
we can start again. They've had fewer graduates, but they've started later. So that's the biggest gap so far, but it's going well for the individuals that graduate. Because like I said, if you had 12 cases in a year and now you have 0 or 1, then that's progress.
Right.
And then the other thing that may not be as big of an issue here or in Albuquerque is there's not all of the treatment we would want available, right? There's not, like in Miami-Dade, they have a residential treatment facility that has everything on site that the person would need from a treatment standpoint. And I know that that's wishful thinking today. It can't happen today, but it does show gaps in treatment that we could be building on in the future, hopefully in this state.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really one of the issues when it comes to homelessness in general, and then it comes to mental illness and substance abuse, is that you can catch people, but if you have nowhere to send them, whether to find a house or to find someone to talk to about your problems, it doesn't really matter because you're not going to solve the big picture.
Exactly. And I would point out that if I did not have a roof over my head, if I was wondering where my next meal was coming from, and I didn't have shoes on my feet, then I think I would be more concerned about those 3 things, which is survival, than I would be about making sure I made my doctor's appointment. So we really have to get to those services and provide basic human needs. It can't be one without the other. It has to be both. And so I really, we've been working with the program leaders and really emphasizing that services are a crucial part of this program.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I know that especially, I think people who live, more traditional lives probably don't understand just how out of whack you feel when you're living on the streets or when you're mentally ill and you're hearing voices or all the different things that happen to them. I know at the shelter where I used to volunteer, they would have, you had to have a COVID test every week to come in. And the COVID tests were like every Thursday from 5 to 7 or whenever they were. And no one who was on the street, most of them didn't remember what day it was. So if they were there coincidentally, they would get their test, but otherwise they would not get their test and they couldn't come in. And I get the idea of responsibility and meeting your obligations, but when you don't know where you are or what day it is, I'm not sure how that happens. So I think meeting people where they are is so important in a program like this.
I completely agree. And that's why the cases are dismissed. They don't even understand the proceedings. And oftentimes when you look at these evaluations, they're activities of daily living that they can't, things that we take for granted, cooking a meal, packing a lunch, knowing what day it is, having a calendar, where it's got to be that basic. And yeah, absolutely, that's a big part of this program is, again, we don't want them having to come to a million court dates. We want the peer support workers to go out in the community, meet them, work with them, engage them. And like you said, meet them where they're at.
Yeah, that's important. So let's say you get arrested in Alamogordo and you're someone that's known to have had competency problems and you go to court. Walk us through what happens then. You kind of did a little bit ago, but I just want people to understand how this works and how it diverts people out of an already busy court system. So that's another advantage, is that it relieves the courts so that they can do all the other things they have to do.
Exactly. So what would happen is, I would love for every person who lives here to sit in a criminal docket for a day. It's very busy. And a lot of the arraignments are virtual because they work more effectively for resources and everything else. So, but the attorney's meeting with the client usually that day, and it's generally speaking for this population going to be a public defender. We have excellent public defenders working on this program, but they are busy and they have huge caseloads. So unfortunately, they're there. The peer support worker should have already reached out as well and kind of given the person an idea of what the program's about. Ideally, the public defender talks with them that day and they agree to participate that day. That does not always work. This is, like I said, it's a tough population and it's busy. This proceeding's busy. So if they want to do it later, they can. But ideally, they do it that day. Once they sign it, it's just a stipulated order. The judge signs, the prosecutor signs, the public defender signs. Once they're there, the peer support worker should meet them at the jail when they're released, and hopefully get them where they need to be if they have a place where they live, or hopefully try to find them a temporary shelter. Like I said, that's been the biggest challenge. And then they get connected with the service provider who does that assessment, the biopsychosocial assessment. And then from there, they try to follow through with the treatment. The peer support worker, it's their obligation to really try to continue to have contact with that person. The judge has a status conference, but the defendants don't need to be there. We know that that's difficult, like you pointed out. But he meets with the attorneys and the peer support worker and finds out what's going on with this person. Are they participating? What do we need to do? And if they feel like they need to bring them back in because they've lost contact with them, they'll set a hearing. And then the final hearing is once they've completed everything. And they don't have to complete like a whole plan, but once that 6 months goes, they don't have new charges and they worked at the program, at least some, then they have a little graduation at the courthouse in front of the judge. A lot of praise, a lot of just really good things. And then they have their case dismissed by the state, which I remind everyone, most likely for nonviolent felonies and misdemeanors would have been the result regardless.
Right. Yeah. I think people have an exaggerated idea of what punishments exist for certain crimes. And that's always an interesting part of this discussion, is that obviously you want people to be held responsible for what they do, especially if they're causing you harm personally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's your business that might go under because you've been targeted so many times. But the reality is in our system, we don't have a way to do that. And putting someone, let's say locking them up for a year in the county jail, doesn't do much except exhaust more resources, different ones.
And a ton of resources, and they might not come out into the community any better. In fact, likely they will not. We don't have the peer support workers working at the courthouse. They are actually employees of the behavioral health provider, because our hope is that even after their case is dismissed, even after we lose jurisdiction, is that they can continue with this behavioral health provider. They can continue with the peer support worker. We want a continuity of care, and what we would love to see, I would love to see is other entities like law enforcement or hospitals who have frequent contact with the same individuals to divert to these same peer support workers and divert to the same place. Nice. We should not work in silos. We should work together. If the hospital's sending them to person A and I'm referring them to person B and law enforcement's referring them to person C, that is very confusing for anyone. If they build a rapport with this behavioral health provider and this peer support worker, let's come together. Let's find a common ground and let's get them back to that same person. That's my hope ultimately, because this one program won't do everything. It's a baby step dealing with a very complex and large problem. We're having contact at so many points with these individuals that we need multiple sources of referring them quickly into the same provider, hopefully.
And on that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. Looking to reach a wider audience and grow your business? For 175 years, the Santa Fe New Mexican has been the trusted voice of Santa Fe, with unmatched local reach in print and online. In addition to our long-standing, independent, family-owned newspaper, we have a full-fledged marketing team with the expertise to help you succeed in the 21st century. From traditional print to precision-targeted digital advertising, we have the tools to connect you with your ideal customers. Partner with us and see the results for yourself. Advertise with the Santa Fe New Mexican and unlock your business's full potential. Visit us at santafenewmexican.com/advertising or call us at 505-995-3852. Thank you.
We are back with Conversations Different, talking to Justice Briana Zamora about a new program designed to help mentally incompetent people get better and relieve the courts and relieve our jails and relieve the public from a lot of the disorder that we've seen on the streets that has made everybody unhappy. I want to go back to the idea that we're in a pilot phase.
Mhm.
So, how do we spread this statewide and get it working more robustly and broadly?
That's a great question. We are having it independently evaluated, which is best practices when you build a program with the courts or really anywhere, right? That evaluation is in the process right now. It's being done by the University of New Mexico. They'll provide us feedback. We're also learning things as we go, and we know where some of the gaps are, the biggest being housing. So those are some resources we're going to need to pool. We will be starting in Albuquerque, where there's a high need, hopefully before the end of the year. After that, we, in addition to needing time to implement and all that, we would need more funding. I think Albuquerque, my understanding, is kind of where the judiciary's funding is going to end. But I think we could do it. I do wonder about some communities if they're too small, but on the other hand, they seem to find them better. So we'll get that evaluation. We'll find out what needs to be improved with these sites that are currently in existence. It's a little harder with the gaps in treatment. Well, not harder. It's actually equally as hard with housing, but those are out of our control, right? The judiciary can't provide housing. We can't create a treatment facility. So that's going to also require working with community stakeholders and saying, look, we think we can do better, but this is what's needed. So we'll evaluate it. I would say after about a year, hopefully by the end of next year, we'll look at maybe proposing to do it statewide.
Okay. So, and I think people get very impatient. They want, everything fixed yesterday. And how do you, especially in an atmosphere where there's this whole get tough on crime kind of push, how do you get people to be patient and get good long-term solutions as opposed to those quick fix, lock everybody up kinds of things?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I agree. I get asked about crime more than anything else in my job, interestingly, and I get the frustration. I live here. I've lived here my whole life. I get it, and I'm raising kids here. I'm equally frustrated, but we want solutions that work. Passing laws quickly or having knee-jerk reactions and creating programs that are not actually effective is not the solution long-term. And I want kids to go to parks regardless of which community they are in. I want them to play safely. I want businesses to thrive without interference. And I want these individuals to also be treated with dignity and respect instead of being cycling through our system. I want all of that, but those things don't happen overnight and they take time. So I would much rather have people be patient, do it right, do it correctly. And look, like I said, this is one program in criminal cases. This will only do a little bit. We need more, but we need to be working together and finding every possible point in which we're having contact with these individuals to get them to services. And obviously, we have a process for very dangerous crimes already in New Mexico. Of course, we should keep following that.
Right. Like if I'm a mentally incompetent person who, poisons 10 people at once, that person wouldn't get diverted and, all that kind of stuff. So you have to look at who this is meant for.
Exactly.
And the other thing, go ahead, Justice.
No, I just said exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is not the dangerous criminals. We have a process in place for them.
Okay. And the other thing is that we have to put this in the context of a state whose behavioral health system, which is the system that treats mentally ill people, was just shattered and has not rebuilt as fast as it should have been, probably.
That's exactly right. And it's a lot better than when I was a trial court judge. When I was a trial court judge, it was during that time period and the resources were virtually non-existent. And like I said, those things don't happen overnight. it's hard to even get enough. I can't believe we're at this point, but it's hard to even get enough individuals who are interested in forensic psychiatry, interested in working with the justice involved population, interested in being a social worker with this population. All of those are needs, and they take time. I know we've had some incentives in place. Perhaps the legislature would want to consider more, but that's also a factor. You can build buildings, but we need individuals with the right expertise to run them.
Yeah. No, it's a hard one. I had a cousin who was a forensic psychologist and I think retired from the state penitentiary, and he had a hard job. And I remember him at the end of the day just looking exhausted because the people he dealt with were so criminally insane and not well. And yet, if you could at least turn their mind to better things, they still had the chance for a productive life. And I think that's one of the things that I love how you've mentioned the dignity of the person. We forget that, I think.
Exactly. And especially, and I know these is interesting. When I was at Metro Court, these are the individuals whose names I would remember because they had so many cases. But it was also the most frustrating because I had to dismiss the case. There was nothing I could do. There's just no dignity for them at all. And whereas with someone who might have a DWI, at least there's a program in place. I can send them for treatment. I can go to DWI school. There was just absolutely nothing. My hands were tied. Some of them started off with family members there begging me, please, judge, send them somewhere. Anywhere, please. We've tried. We don't know what to do. We're on a waiting list. They won't go to treatment. And at most, I could hand them a sheet of referrals with wait lists of who knows how long.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the governor's point, is that she wants a way civilly to maybe involuntarily commit some of those people. Of course, there has to be a place for them to go. And I know a lot of advocates for the mentally ill think that's the wrong approach. But if you're a family member and you're frustrated and you can't help them, do we need a way to help them, even if it's against their own will, almost to save them from themselves? Is that another step that we're going to have to take as a state?
That'll be up to our legislature. But I will say right now we have commitment. I believe the beds are pretty sparse right now because a lot of people, even under our current law, get civilly committed.
Right.
What we don't have a lot of is what I said I saw in Miami-Dade is that residential treatment facility where all your services are there on site. I don't see a lot of those in New Mexico that are very welcoming and warm and a place where someone would want to live, not like a jail.
Yep.
And then we do have, including now in Santa Fe, please, if anyone's listening to this, you have assisted outpatient treatment. If you have a history of non-compliance with treatment and you're seriously mentally ill, you can file a petition to have them, it's basically civilly committed. It's not voluntary, but it's outpatient, it's in the community. And really, I think that they're trying to do the same thing we are in comp diversion, other than it's not voluntary. I think they're really trying to get them to the services that they need. So I would tell the family, if they have a history of non-compliance with treatment, maybe that's an option as well.
Okay. So there's more choices than there were a year or two ago. And hopefully, as everyone works together, you'll build more choices and a system that supports the different facets, support each other. That's kind of hopefully where we're going.
I hope so. That's my dream for New Mexico, that we work together to get individuals immediate treatment at different facilities. You really have to think outside the box or borrow things from what other states are doing to really get at this.
Yeah. And that's something that we sometimes forget in New Mexico, that we're not unique and we need to go look at what's working elsewhere and bring it back.
Exactly.
Yep. And on that note, this has been another Conversations Different. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to Conversations Different, hosted by me, Inez Russell Gomez, editorial page editor for the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our weekly episodes would not be possible without your support. We hope you enjoy them and keep listening. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Consider signing up for our newsletter so you never miss an episode, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our podcast is available by visiting our website, santafenewmexican.com/podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez is produced by Matt Dalside and Ernesto Cisneros, published by the Santa Fe New Mexican, a local and independent newspaper owned by Robin Martin.